Yeah, so my name is Melissa Burntown, and I am a year into my PhD at Newcastle University, and it is in collaboration with YVAN, which is why I'm here. I think it's probably important just to mention, because we're also going to hear from Alice as well, who is another collaborative researcher with YVAN. So it's kind of interesting, there's so many crossovers and similarities between our research projects, and they also differ as well. So I'm fine art practice based, so I'm using art making as a means of conducting research. The research is through art making, as well as those kind of traditional kind of research methods that you would think of, like surveys, interviews, all that kind of stuff. I'll give you a prompt. But the way that the collaboration came about really between me and YVAN was just through discussion with Roger, who was formerly head of research at YVAN, and I was in touch with Roger, and he was talking about how YVAN really wanted to kind of embed research in what it did, and it wasn't a research project that was kind of prescribed by YVAN or anything. There wasn't a call out, but in collaboration through that dialogue, we kind of formed this research proposal. So it was kind of quite a mutual thing. And I look at this really embarrassing photo of me, isn't it? Which is strange to put in, but you know. So I'll just kind of what, trustworthy? Yeah. Oh, excellent.
That's what I mean when I'm about 20.
Oh gosh, I know what they were. Yeah, sorry, a long time ago. So I'll just give you a quick introduction of who I am. I'm an artist based in Leeds. So alongside my own art practice and prior to my research, I've worked in the arts sector for over 9 years, predominantly in artist-led organisations and public funded galleries. So this work has involved wearing many different hats in many different roles, including working as a freelance technician, a gallery committee member, public programme and residencies producer, and most recently the hat of exhibitions curator at the Tetley, which is here in Leeds, so some of you may know, and that's a publicly funded NPO organisation. So yeah, so this was from the Tetley's promo headshots that they did, which is why that's in there. So this image that Ella was just commenting on in the top right, this was taken in 2016, and myself and a group of 9 other artists co-founded SURF, which is an artist-led project space, studios, and ultimately a community in Leeds city centre. SURF is still going. We operate as horizontally as possible, and I still have my studio there too. My art practice is generally informed by ideas around threat and survival, and thinking about how a sense of precarious existence is articulated through the objects and the actions that we make, that we as people produce. De-anthropocentric ecological thinking, archaeology, and also museum display and collecting practices also often kind of intersect and inform and affect kind of areas of my practice. So I work across lots of different media: sculpture, print, text, video. I think making is very much at the heart of my practice. This is a fairly recent exhibition. This is some a kind of a shot of a work from 2018 or something. And this is an Egyptian hand axe that I found on a research visit in the Leeds Museums and Galleries collection. So research has kind of been an integral part of how I work anyway. So you were saying earlier that YVAN wants to recognise artists as researchers in their own right. So there you go. So yeah, I'm now wearing the hat of researcher. Oh, can you skip to the next slide? Because I'm skipping on here. It's not connected. So a year in is a strange point at which to present your research. This is the original research question that was kind of the starting point. So an inquiry into the precarity and support needs of artist networks in a post-pandemic North. And I can kind of, because you probably can't see because it's changed the font a little bit, but just to pull out some of these key research questions. So how will the context of a post-pandemic North, so I'm thinking about the North of England, and the lived experiences of artists during the pandemic, how will it shape the future of artist-led networks? Thinking about what perspectives and learning is presented by those experiences, and how can those experiences be explored and made useful and applied through art practice methods for artist-led networks. So just to unpack that a little bit, how can we think about all of that, but through art practice, which comes naturally to us as artists? So how can art practice itself respond to the challenges and questions around supporting art practice? How can support needs be for networks be identified and responded to in creative, actionable and accessible ways? So you can see how that kind of intersects with some of the work that YVAN is doing, and also thinking about resources and how they can be shared with, it says the visual arts sector, but I'm thinking also to those networks that I'm working with, and how can those resources, which will hopefully be an outcome of the research project, how can that be shared through public-facing art-based methods? So what does that look like when you put it out into the world in practice through art? Sorry if I'm waffling a little bit, it's quite hard to distill a project down into. It's also important to mention that as an artist based in the North of England, and the member of a small artist-led community, I also have a stake in this research, which is quite interesting to think about. But, you know, I would propose that maybe from the inside is a useful place to think from. I'm conscious of time already.
You know the questions, are they available in time?
Yeah, I think I can share anything with you, but I think we have something already on Notion and everything. But yeah, but it's funny because they're just constantly changing. Like sometimes I think my research question is just like, what does it mean to make art at the end of the world? Like that's genuine. No, genuinely, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like when you're thinking about, you know, like you mentioned earlier, you know. What does it mean to make art when you're worried about how you're going to pay your fuel bills, or how you're going to feed your kids, or how you, and then you have all these other organizations approaching you saying, we think there's value in what you do, but we're not going to pay you for it, or we're not going to pay you enough for it. So, you know, and how does it change the art that people are making and then putting out into the world when these questions with this sense of kind of existential threat on all fronts is kind of informing those practices and the kind of lived experiences of artists, trying to balance all of that stuff. So I don't know how to put that into a research question. And I don't, you know, that's sorry, Harry. I'm trying. So yeah, but I mean that's kind of why you do the research. So primarily practice-based art. So artistic experimentations, I'm looking at developing new ways in my own practice that I can respond to different elements of research. So that might be how I can utilize interview transcripts and kind of make that into material for making artwork with, or is there a different kind of way that I can kind of put that through a creative lens to find something new out about that data? I don't know. And a key thing that I'm looking to do is a kind of co-design forum event with members of artist networks that will be in collaboration with YVAN too, to basically bring artists together, and we can think around, when I've kind of gone through the data collection phase, present all that data to a group of artists and say, okay, so how shall we like creatively respond to this? And let's continue to do that together. And hopefully the outcome of that co-design forum will be a series of, I guess there would be workshops, but I'm not sure, some kind of artistic collaborative activity with those members of networks that we can continue to produce in response, and generate. I mean, that's the art as research bit, which is very much, it really needs to be with artists who identify as being members of artist networks. And yeah, so there'll be kind of practice-based outputs, workshops, events, exhibitions, and also a big conference at the end with YFAN. I'm also doing all the other stuff like surveys and interviews, and the thing that I am going to be working on now up until Christmas is a historic review of artist networks in the North, to kind of provide a kind of solid context on which to build this ongoing, this kind of next phase. And also theoretical research across sociology, environmental philosophy, things of precarity, existential threat, the things that are generally informing my practice as well. That's also kind of feeding into this strange melting pot, I think, at the moment. Can we nip to the next slide? So just to give you a sense of what I've been doing over the past year, and I think I've just hit the 10-minute mark. I've got like 2 slides left. So I have been experimenting with new media, mainly in ceramics. I've been having a lot of conversation with people about how working with clay has become. Lots of people took up pottery during the pandemic, which seems to be a thing. There's certain materials, certain media that seem to have, for some reason, been what artists have turned to. And I'm interested in unpacking that a little bit more when I do get to the point of actually having these conversations with people. But I'm thinking about building up a kind of material and making toolkit, which could potentially be something to take through into the workshop phase. And there's also this idea of kind of escapism through working with material, and that idea of escapism as a response to, how kind of paralyzing it can feel in the face of precarity or the fuel crisis, so I think material focused making is somehow important. So this is me playing with some clay. I did a workshop with Woodhouse Community Centre just outside of Leeds, that has a kind of public display in Leeds City Museum at the moment. This is a very intense seminar that I did at Newcastle University, which all the PhD cohort sat around my work in progress and pulled it apart. And I'm going to make a new work, I guess I'm going to write a new script based on that crit, which will then it will become another part of this exhibition that I'm installing at the moment in York. So it's also this strange kind of messy iterative process. Also working on writing practices. This is also, I took part in the British School at Rome residency programme, which was earlier this year in the summer, and really thinking about, so it brought together researchers from across different disciplines within the humanities, and really what it was all focused on, what's the value of cross-disciplinary research, what's the value of us talking to each other and borrowing methods from each other, which was really, so rich, thinking about, I'm talking to historians, poets, archaeologists who, there is so much shared in our interests, but our approaches are so different. So also just trying to kind of expand my kind of research toolkit as well as my kind of making toolkit, if that makes sense. And then also the research working group at YVAN has been really integral in terms of unpacking a lot of conversation around this. We're talking about what is an artist network, and particularly in the kind of survey design, and kind of thinking about how you select people, how do you select, you know, and just pulling apart all those problems of, you know, how, yeah, like who is your group that you're going to focus on? How do you select that? How can you, you know, try and generalize between all these different artist networks who have so many different memberships and priorities and structures and hidden and unhidden, and, you know, and we haven't got any answers, but it's been an incredibly rich forum in which to kind of have that conversation, I think. And yeah, hopefully that will kind of continue to kind of shape, you know, the form of the research. So looking ahead, thinking and rethinking the boundaries of the research. So that's what I was really just saying. And one of the key things thinking about at the moment is allowing artists to self-define being a member of an artist network, or what, you know, I don't think it's for me or anybody else to prescribe. So that's kind of something that it's going to be quite interesting. Historical review of artist networks, the survey, and then some, I think what it will be at the moment is a series of semi-structured interviews with members of artist networks in the north of England that will be informed by that kind of more wide-reaching survey response. So we get to kind of dig down into things, and then after digging down into all of that stuff, we then take all of that stuff and then we use it again and put it into the co-design forum event, and then we take that and then we put that into the workshops, and then that goes into, so it's, you can see it's going to be this kind of iterative process. So it's very hard for me to say what the outcomes are going to be yet, but yeah, it's going to be exciting of this next year to start really collaborating with other artists and trying to unpack all of this stuff.